All right, we're live. This is Robert Phoenix with the Sunday Night Astro Livestream. Hey, what's happening, everybody? Everybody who isn't quite here yet, but will be. I'm rocking some new earbuds tonight with a new little microphone. So I'm going to need some feedback as to actually how well this is working. So if you can give me a little feedback, and I'm not talking guitar feedback, you can listen to what I'm saying and hey, there's Judy. Sounds wonderful. All right. What's happening, Judy Island? Hi, I can hear you clearly. Ooh. Working well. Howdy, bro. Sounds good. All right. How was everybody the last weekend? Really kind of the last unofficial weekend of summer. It's gone by so quickly, hasn't it? Well, the Farmer's Almanac says we're going to have a super cold and wet winter. Hello, Sally. Hello, Anna. Greetings, everybody. It's a little bit cloudy here. We might get some rain. We might get some thunder, some lightning over the course of the next few days. How lovely on the winter forecast. Yeah, well, maybe this is the prelude to the solar minimum, you know? Everything gets ramped up. You get super hot, and then everything drops. And I think we're going to have a very cold winter. There's Lynette. Hi, Lynette. Chiming in from the Pacific Northwest, all the way up there in Oregonville, great part of the United States and the planet. How's everybody's weekend going? Are you guys chilling? Oil prices might go up. I'd say there's probably a pretty good chance of that, especially because if everybody's using a lot of people use oil to heat their homes. So maybe you want to get in on that if it's cold in the USA. What's going on, JMP Love? Yeah, we're going to have an unconditional love moment tonight. Just got to notice today my gas price is going up. Yep. Apparently in California, they're going to start to cut back on gas. This is what I've heard. California, the wonderful Agenda 21 model state. There's Black Market Medicine. Good morning. Thunderstorm in Colorado last night were epic. Love it. Good. There's Kim Krause. Hello, Kimberly Krause. Let's see what else we got going on here. Who else? Who else is chiming in? Energy price in Australia is a huge topic right now. Sally's pretty sharp with the money stuff. She's a Cancer. Cancers are good with money. Aren't I right, Sally? You got your game on. Hope to see you soon. You just might. You just might see me soon. This is true. She says, I'll try. Hey, what's happening? There's Joan. Joan S. Joan is a very gifted dentist, and she's also our secret weapon in our fight against fluoride here in Fredericksburg. Give Joan a big round of applause. She is an anti-fluoride activist. You in flannel, funny looking. Yes, my dude look. This is my dude vibe. Yeah, I saw this shirt, pretty good. You know, flannel, you get a boost of testosterone by about like 1.5 to 2% whenever you wear flannel. It's true. Can teeth be repaired naturally? Yes, they can be remineralized. And Joan might actually be able to answer that question. Yeah, Joan's a rock star. We had an anti-fluoride meeting here in very initial with the supervisors, the board, right, city council, and Joe got up and rocked it with all kinds of great information. There's Beth Berry. Hi, Beth Berry. Yeah, I'm telling you right now, if you wear flannel, it's about 1.5 to 2% raise in testosterone. It's been proven. They did a study at MIT. Use hydroxyapatite toothpaste. There we go. There's Joan coming right in. You see, you show up here and you think you're just going to get astrology. And what happens? You get advice on remineralizing your teeth. Yeah. How good does it get? Pretty cool, huh? You get bonus content here. Thank you, Joan, for bringing that to people's attention. So how does it feel as summer is dwindling away? The summer of 2018. What a strange summer. Like blazing fucking hot, right? Like super hot. Really hot. And in some ways the summer that, like, when we think of summer, I think of being able to relax, take time out, go on a little vacation, regenerate. And have we done that with this summer? MIT. Oh yeah, you should ask Ryan. Joe's son Ryan is now off at MIT. Congratulations. Congratulations, Joe. You have raised a genius. But have we had a relaxing summer? A summer where we've been able to really just kind of kick off our shoes, go to the beach, and have that kind of summertime? I think the summertime on Earth is over. I hate to say it. I really do. I don't think we get any days off anymore. That's what it feels like to me. Like I know I'm waxing poetically, but when I was a kid in the 1970s, there was a very different relationship with summer. So different. Of course, I was a kid, but even up through the 80s and to some extent the 90s, the summers were different. They had a different vibe, different feel. You know, I was watching a video tonight. It was about how the news media edits events. And this is a film. It's on YouTube. It's available on YouTube. And it's from, I think, the 1990s. It has a lot of satellite feed footage. And it shows what people say. It gets cut out. You know, what's going on behind the scenes. And it really feels like everything got dialed up in the 90s. But that's when the intensity really got dialed up. And that the 90s in some ways are kind of post-historical in a lot of ways. That's what it feels like to me. We get to the beginning of that kind of post-historical time with the 90s. I remember thinking in the 90s that time as we know it had run out. And we were on a completely different kind of time scale. Summers used to last forever. Summer was the best time. So here we are. Did people have a nice summer? Did you guys stressful? Everyone says no stressful summer. Yeah, so the whole idea of stress now is commonplace. It's, you know, we are bombarded with stress all the time. And a lot of it has to do with the media, of course, the media. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that we were living in a really fractured political climate. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the president of the United States is on the other side of crosshairs 24/7. So this creates an incredibly stressful environment for people. And initially, there was a lot of adrenaline. I think maybe the first year where people were getting really, really fired up about what was taking place and drawing lines in the sand, which I think were interesting. Like, we're going to draw lines in the sand about, you know, how we've communicated, in some ways what we've stood for. Not, I mean, if you look at what was going on prior to Trump, and this includes, by the way, the Bush administration. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little political here. I know a lot of people don't like political stuff with astrology. But when you look at that time and period, this whole notion of political correctness, I mean, even during the Bush administration, there was a lot of political correctness happening. In fact, political correctness was used as a cover during the Bush administration to perpetrate some of the most heinous crimes on humanity. Yes, I know there was a lot of born again Christianity, and there was a lot of super church activity, mega church. It's because Pluto was in Sagittarius during that time. But since then, well, it's not since then. We've been swimming in this sort of pool of politically correct thought, or thought that is based upon some level of programming, mind control, etc. Now, some people won't go that deep. Some people will say, well, you know, I have always wanted to say these things. I can't say these things to my friends. I can't say these things to my family, because if I do, they'll excommunicate me, or I'll lose, you know, I'll lose connection, or I'll lose some kind of relationship, which is always sort of the front lines of mind control and the thought police. Because what happens is that when that occurs, the first things that go are relationships and our connection with other people. So people shut their mouths for a very long time for whatever reason, whatever it was. Like, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, or this is not my belief, whatever that was. And then when Trump came along, well, that exploded, and all of a sudden people were thinking, oh my God, now I can say things, whether they were really well thought out or not. It was like the governor was lifted off of this whole idea of political correctness, which I've talked about quite a bit. And that was actually a really, really good thing. That was, I think, one of the most liberating things that came about through the election of Trump. Although some people might say, well, that's hate speech, or, anytime we bring things up that are difficult to talk about or run contrary to the contemporary program, it's very easy to put them in a bucket, put them in a box, and say, well, this is hate speech. And that was quite liberating. That was really, really liberating. Like, I'll give you an analogy. So when poetry for a long, long time was iambic pentameter, and things rhymed, couplets rhymed. When that ended, and when poetry went into free verse, it was really, really liberating. There was the feeling that you could move beyond this set of text, and it was a really fascinating and freeing thing to do. But after a while, even the most sort of ingenious or inspired free verse selections could often sort of degenerate into very kind of mundane, or I wouldn't say nonsensical, but language that was so alliterative that it had no connection to anything. But it's always that release period. It's always when something's been bottled up for a long time, and then it's opened up. There's that release, which is great. It's liberation. I mean, I think that's why, like, some people really like bondage stuff, because they're in this sense of being tied down, held down, and then there's that release point, and it's like, they feel more free than they have. Who knows? It's not my thing, but I get that sense that it's not the bondage, but it's the release from the bondage that I think is the liberating thing. And so we had that with Trump, and there was a lot of energy around that, and that energy is sort of dissipated now, and we're in this phase where things are very unclear on some level. They're really unclear. Like, are things ever going to end? Or is the Mueller thing ever going to kind of wind up? My answer is probably likely no. They're going to try to run this all the way through. It's right. By the way, that's right out of the Clinton playbook. This is what they did with Bill Clinton. I talked about this months ago. I talked about this shit like in November of last year. This is what I was referring to, and looking at what was happening in the Middle East and what was happening in places like Kosovo and the Balkans, and Clinton versus Trump. Anyway, it feels now that people, once we've gotten through that initial burst of, smashing the window, smashing the door of PC thought, and being able to, at the very least, because what's interesting is that, there's this widespread phenomena, QAnon, people are trying to understand the truth, red pill, all that stuff. That is synonymous with the breakdown of politically correct thought. The two are not they're not indistinct from one another. Like, you couldn't have one without the other, because people are now freed up in some ways to go find whatever it is that they're looking for, which is the underlying cause and the root of why the system is so dysfunctional. And the system is dysfunctional because it's been set up that way. And it's not going to be easy to trim or to recorrect at the level of where the system exists. So if we want to change something, it's going to have to be locally, it's going to have to be inside of yourself, or we're going to have to deal with something cataclysmic so that the entire system either goes through a phase of entropy, or it goes through a phase of conflict and crisis, and out of that conflict and crisis, something else emerges. So here we are. It's the final days of summer, and let's get into the chart of the day. Do we have the chart of the day music? Remember we did this last week? The chart of the day, the chart of the day, chart of the day. Today's the chart of the day. Hey, hey, hey. All right, there it is, the chart of the moment. Who's that band, Asia, Heat at the Moment? Remember that song? Speaking of time travel, the 80s. It's really funny to go back and look at some of those videos from the 80s and the 90s. There's a video of Katie Couric, and she's very young. And, you know, she's just getting on the steps of the pyramid. She's climbing that pyramid. And they were on, I think it was the Today Show? And they were on a place called President's Island. And it's, I guess it's, you know, is it where the Statue of Liberty is? Is that President's Island? Question mark. But that's where she was. And so there was all this nautical stuff going on. And they were talking about Columbus. It was Columbus Day. So they're on President's Island. There's all this nautical stuff. And she's dressed up like a sailor. I mean, you know, those 80s fashions, right? She's got the shoulder pads on, and she's got I mean, she looks like she's she's working on the second deck of the Love Boat. It's fascinating. It's like, there she is. So you go back and you look at these people, and you look at their attire, their fashion, their vibe. But it's very interesting. Very interesting to do a little time travel. So let's get into the chart of the moment. Okay, what do we have? We got Sun in Virgo at 10 degrees. Tonight, by the way, if you want to go to my website, robertphoenix.com, you'll be able to get the charts that we're going to be looking at tonight. There are 3 of them: Charlie Sheen, Keanu Reeves, and then Dan White. Some of you may know who Dan White was. If not, you're going to find out tonight. It'll be kind of an interesting breakdown of Dan White and maybe, perhaps, some form of programming that might have gone on with Dan White and what was happening kind of concurrently during that time, not in the Bay Area, but in a place called Guyana, Jim Jones and Jonestown. So we'll get into that a little bit tonight. All right, so the chart of the moment, we got the ascendant at 27 degrees Pisces. And as the night goes on, as the show goes on, that ascendant's going to shift a little bit. We're going to get to about 28, 29. Boom, we're going to have Aries rising. Probably before the show is over tonight, Chiron's right on the ascendant. And we'll get closer to the ascendant. This is a very interesting kind of moment. Like how can we astro sync what's happening with, excuse me, the chart of the moment and some of the charts we're going to be looking at tonight. Yes, there is a thread and a theme. You shall see it as it emerges. So let's just let's take for instance right now. Okay, we're at the 27th degree, final degrees of Pisces on the ascendant. Over the course of the next couple hours, especially right here in South Central Texas, we're going to have Aries on the ascendant, and Chiron is right there. So if you weren't in the chat room, if you were just doing your thing, and again, you know, sort of close in terms of time, space, with Chiron on the ascendant, you know, we're talking about vulnerability and healing, right? Healing, and we're talking about, you know, the healing of the male and masculine healing, and we're just starting off with this Chiron in Aries. It's going to be in Chiron's going to be in Aries for what, the next 8.5 years. So it's a pretty long run. And the idea of like healing this, so it's really fascinating because one of the things that we're seeing, and of course we live in sort of this dualistic universe, is one of the things that we're seeing is this idea of toxic masculinity. That this is a big topic of conversation socially. And by the way, that's driven by the media, and that's driven by social media. And don't ever think that the media and social media are the lens through which everybody looks, because they're not. This is truth. This is gospel. Okay. Not everything is an encapsulation and a snapshot of Twitter. It's not. It gets the most attention, but it is not the underlying sort of layer of what we call consensus reality. And this came to my attention when I was connecting with a woman who was looking at my website and trying to help me out with some marketing stuff. And she said to me, "Do you know what the most?" And you guys know the answer. This is the most popular cable network on TV, and it's the Hallmark Channel. More people watch the Hallmark Channel than any of them. They watch it more than CNN or Fox or ESPN, more than any of them. HBO, it's the Hallmark Channel because people really want to have a sense of connection. They want to feel connected. They want to have a happy ending. And not a happy ending as like in a Thai massage parlor happy ending. It's a different kind of happy ending. They want a happy ending. They want people to either reconnect, heal, bond, have a story where humanity is closer at the end than further apart. As a culture, we do not celebrate nihilism, even though Hollywood would like to project that. Nihilism is, nihilism on some level sells. We've been indoctrinated into a death cult for quite a long time, but that's really, that's not the layer beneath it all. The layer beneath it all is people wanting emotional content, resolution, healing, bonding, foundation. These are the organic values that people are really striving for and yearning for in their lives. And the best way to probably go about doing that is to turn your TV off, unplug from the news cycles. I mean, to be honest with you, if anybody wants a real shot at having a life that is defined out of some sort of social discord, not defined by it, but outside of it, you got to unplug. You got to unplug, and these things have to become important for you. They have to become really important. And when they do become important, then guess what? All of a sudden, you start to have these connections. So we have Chiron in Aries right there on the ascendant. We're talking about vulnerability, especially for men. And we're going to be seeing this again for the next 8 years. And the reason I got into this or this topic was because there seems to be this ongoing sort of dialogue happening that masculinity is toxic and all we need to do is get rid of men. All I need to do is get rid of men. All we need, and first it starts with, the white male, right? Boom, starts with white guy. Well, let's see what happens. Maybe we socially castrate the white guy. Well, then who's next? Well, it's probably the black guy. And then it's probably the brown guy. And it's probably the Muslim. And all of a sudden now they just keep hacking away until there's nothing. The white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male is the canary in the coal mine. And if there are other men out there and they're listening to this, you better, you might say, oh, well, great, this is my time. This is my time. We're yanking these guys off the top of the pyramid. Well, that's not really the case. And you just watch what happened with the Bolshevik Revolution. I was watching this young guy on the ESPN. His name is Will Kane. He's really interesting. He's around 42. 42 is young for me. And he's got a radio show simulcast. The name itself is interesting, right? Will Kane. And I believe he's in Aries. And his son is right there. This is an interesting sort of Astro sync. His son is conjunct Chiron right now. So let me do a quick thing on Will Kane. He's an interesting guy. Let me plug him in here really quickly. You girls will like him. He's a good-looking dude. Great smile. Okay. So he's born on March 28th. And that's going to put his son, right around like 5 Aries. Okay, 5 Aries, which means that Chiron is very close to his sun. So he's got this Chiron sun conjunction going on. And I saw him on the show called First Take. And he had Stephen A. Smith on one side, who is Black American. And he had Max Kellerman on the other side, who is always taking this, very kind of SJW, socially liberal stance. And he was sitting right in the middle of them. And he was talking about, Black Lives Matter and white privilege and, white male toxicity. And this guy held his own. And he said that I don't believe in any of that stuff. He says, I'm an individualist. I live my life as an individualist, and I judge everybody on their individual nature. I judge them all on who you are as a man. And the way that he went about this took a lot of balls, by the way, because ESPN, when you are in the mass media spotlight and you get into things like race and privilege, right, you better know what the fuck you're talking about. Because if you don't, you will be tarred and feathered. And he got in there and he held his own. And I was really impressed. I was impressed. And I thought, and I knew he was an Aries, and I knew he was an early Aries. And I thought to myself, oh, this is Chiron speaking. Because number one, it's a show about sports and athletes. And he was deviating from this social norm. And he told Max Kellerman, like, I reject what you're talking about. I don't believe in that. What I believe is instead of trying to, bring this discourse to another level and to do all this other, look, no, let's work with each other individually and let's figure out who we are on an individual level. I thought it was great. I thought it was really, it's like, okay, this guy gets it. And for him, clearly he had thought this out a little bit. And so for him to do that was pretty significant. So his show just debuted in January this last year. So he's just getting his feet under him. Well, here we go. Let me get back to the chart of the moment. Let me get into it here. Hey, did you guys see the show we did with Chris and Steve? That's up on YouTube. The John D special. The John D special. That could be a name for a band, don't you think? The John D special. Wouldn't that be like a country band, like a country rock band? The John D Express. John D and the Angels. How about that? Yeah, so we're talking about vulnerability and this whole idea around, and this is a guy that Will Kane shattered some of he silenced some of those PC voices in his head. But in order to talk about that, man, you got to be really clear. You've got to understand where you're coming from. You got to be resolved. You have to have some kind of resolution, to put these ideas forward. So you don't sound like you're a bigot or a racist or anything like that. It's a razor's edge. It's a total razor's edge. He walked it. He walked right down that thing. It was great. It was totally great. And yeah, I mean, I feel like that's where we are right now. We have to walk down that razor's edge, no matter who we are. The razor's edge is it's the edge of truth. Now we're at 2 degrees. Aries ascendant, Chiron right there. So this Chiron in Aries is going to be a theme. And men are going to go through some very interesting times. So at the onset, what do we have? We have Chiron, Aries, dealing with these ideas that are promulgated by the social media. And, the Twitterverse. Toxic masculinity. And I'll bet you, all of you in the chat room, know at least one man that's actually a really good dude. And you can vouch for that guy and say, that's not a toxic male. And probably even more than one. So a lot of the things that we're being fed in our culture are fairy tales. They're fairy tales. Total fairy tales. And not only they're fairy tales, but they're dark and twisted fairy tales. And they're aimed to demoralize us. All of us. When we get into Chiron and Aries, it's not just sex specific. It also has to deal with power, individual power. Yes, ladies in the chat room, you have a masculine part of who you are, right? You have male energy that you use in your life. And some of you use it in a more direct way than others. It's part of who you are. Just like we men have feminine energy in our lives and in our bodies. We got to figure out how to use that. Well, Chiron and Aries is the opening, it is the vent, it is the wound that allows both sexes to understand what this male energy is about and how we can deal with it. And for men, most men they've been lost, totally lost about, how they use their energy or how they can express their masculinity. I read Henry Mackau quite a bit because I think he's very funny and interesting. And he had a column on his website, I think yesterday. And it was about feminine qualities and how men were seduced by these feminine qualities that were put forth by people like Hugh Hefner and Playboy and the popular culture at the time. And he's absolutely right. And I've talked about this before and how that really sort of twisted and perverted men's connection to real women. It became very distorted. And the whole idea, and I know this for me personally, growing up in the 70s, was, when you have these hormones that are raging, the whole idea is just, sex is, it's always on the top of your head, front of your brain. And of course, we had a culture at that time which was putting it forward in a way that had never been done before. It was hitting this mass cultural level. And so as a result of that, it distorted, how a lot of men would move forward in their lives. And that's still taking place. None of that has changed. None of it's changed at all. So this Chiron in Aries is going to be a very interesting time. It's going to go retrograde. It's going to go back to 28 Pisces. It's going to come back again one more time. It's going to hit those early degrees. So we're talking about it. It's right there. It's on the chart of the month. We're going to talk about men tonight too, as it relates to like issues around power and powerlessness in a lot of ways. We got the sun. It's at 10 degrees. It's just on the outside of that grand trine that we've had for the past week, which started roughly like last Monday or last Sunday. We started getting into that energy with that grand trine last week. And now the sun is at this 8-degree orbit. It's starting to move away. It's starting to move away from Uranus and Saturn. It's okay. It's all right. All good things must come to an end. However, Mercury will be moving right along, and it will take its place in that grand trine. Won't be quite as like uber powerful as quote unquote the sun, but it'll definitely catch up, and so we'll have some more players in Grand Trineville. But it's still there, and it's an opportunity to bring practical and innovative energy into your life. How can you do the same thing that you've been doing and breathe new life into it? That's a big piece. I think a lot of people though are tired. You're tired for a number of different reasons. We're being bombarded by all these gamma rays, apparently, which are feeding into these crazy earth changes, some of the volcanic stuff. And the gamma ray intensity is connected to the solar minimum, which seems like it's kind of in the air. And I think it makes us tired. Not only that, but we went through this whole eclipse cycle, and I think it burnt a lot of people out. But it's okay. I mean, there's some good energy that's here in the charts and in this astrological nexus. And it's not flashy energy; it's solid energy. It's kind of like if you wanted to build up your immune system, or you wanted to build up your strength, you would use things like, if you're a man, some ginseng. If you're a woman, maybe some Dong Quai, maybe Eleutherio. This is kind of the energy. It is not a super flashy energy, but if you pace yourself, you can build your energy up. And we're going to need the energy. We're going to need our chi in the months to come. So I would say work on it now. Don't push too hard. You don't want to push too hard with the sun in Virgo. It's a very volatile energy in some ways. Virgo is volatile. It's nervous. It's mercurial. So you want to go easy. You want to do walks. You want to do things like resistance band training, yoga. This is kind of the slow burn. Okay. So build your energy up. I think this is an important time to do it. This is the months ahead. You're going to need it. I think you're going to need it. So whatever it is, whatever your reserves are, energetic reserves. Virgo is always looking for the worst possible scenario. You ever hang out around a Virgo rising person? I know some of you in the chat room are Virgo rising. Gotta love you. Gotta love you. You're the people we want on the Titanic. Because before the Titanic sinks, you know where all the life vests are, or whatever, fill in the blank. That's the nature of Virgo rising. It's like, okay, here's the exits. Where are the life vests? Okay, they're over here. God bless you. So maybe if you have Virgo rising, you know what I'm talking about. And Virgo is a sign where, we want to be prepared. It's the nature of Virgo. Why? Because the backside of Virgo is Pisces, and Pisces is completely chaotic. We're going to be into a Sun-Neptune opposition here in 5 days. So mark that on your calendar. On the 7th of September, Sun-Neptune opposition. What's real? What's not real? That's going to be a big theme. That'll be a big theme in the world. So remember this. You heard it here tonight. So 5 days from now, so we're talking Thursday, Friday, the Sun-Neptune opposition. There may be things that are going to be said, they're going to be shared, that you're going to see that may make you feel incredulous. Like, how can this be? Is this real? Is it not real? The whole idea of fake news, real news, whatever. That's really going to come to the surface here. And by Friday, something's going to happen on Friday. Friday's that news day. They always release the bad shit on Friday, or they have like a crazy story on Friday, or they'll have like one of their patented shootings on a Friday. And all of a sudden, everybody's oh no. So this last week, I was having a session with one of my clients, and I saw that they had a drill going on in the school over here. And it wasn't your ordinary drill. They had those what do they call them? Cherry pickers, where you get in them and they take you up and you like fix telephone lines and stuff like that. They had a cherry picker there and they were doing two things at once because they actually changed some lights while there. But while the drill was going on, they had a video camera and they were videotaping all the kids at this drill. And, and I thought to myself, because, of course, I'm a bit deviant and I think about these things. And I thought, well, if they wanted a false flag, if they wanted to have a false flag, wouldn't you want to have pre-recorded video footage as a part of the event so you could plug it in and say, oh, look what was happening, See, we have this. But that might have been from a different day and time. It could have been from last week. And I'm not saying that we're going to have a false flag here, knock on burlap. But you never know. Or it could be used for another school. You never know. And I just thought about it. It's like, oh, that's odd. It's odd that they're videotaping this. And not just video, it was almost like a Hollywood production. And they're up in the crane and they're doing something. What else do we have happening here? Let's see. Okay. So I wanted to go back to Friday. Just circle Friday on your calendar, that Sun-Neptune opposition. Remember the phrase, what is real? Question mark. What is real? Not what is hip. What is real? It was funny. When I was looking at that video tonight, they were talking about the debates between Clinton and Bush, which is such a sham because we all know now that Clinton and Bush they're all part of the same team. They had this again, what is real? They had this charade going on. Clinton was running all this cocaine, into Arkansas, and a lot of it was coming out of Colombia from the Bush family. So this whole scene that they were rivals or running against each other was a complete and utter lie. It's a little bullshit. But anyway, one of the things that they were talking about was Bush was talking about the debate. And he said, let's get it on. And then Larry King started using it. And then Clinton started using it. And then Ross Perot started using it. And they all started using this phrase, let's get it on. I'm like, did they say it because Bush said it? Or were they all told to use the phrase, let's get it on? Question mark. It was interesting. All right, so we got the Sun and Virgo. Again, circle Friday. Circle Friday, Thursday, Friday, in the question, what is real? Sunday, and you can apply that to your own life. You can apply that to your own. The Sun in Virgo is really super critical, and Neptune in Pisces doesn't give a shit. So that's another thing. It's like, how much do you care? How much are you invested in that Virgoan sort of locus of control? And Neptune in Pisces has no control at all. It's like, nah. whatever, right? That'll be an interesting dynamic for everybody. Venus is at 25 degrees in Libra. I'm having a little Venus conjunction tonight, just for a day or two. Venus conjunct Venus. We're going to have Venus in Libra for another 10 days, 9 days, and then it goes into Scorpio, and then we're going to have Venus retrograde. We're going to have a Venus retrograde, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's in October. Let's get into the ephemeris and talk a little bit about Venus retrograde. We just got through Mars retrograde, right? And now we're into the feminine aspect with Venus. Let's see what we got here. All right. Here we go. Okay, Venus retrograde. Yeah, that's happening on the 6th of October. And that starts off at 10 degrees Scorpio. And it goes all the way back to 25. Okay, so this is interesting. This is an interesting kind of moment because tonight Venus is at 25 Libra. So think about today. Think about what you've been going through. Think about your connections and relations with other people. Think about the degree of harmony. Think about your interpersonal sense of diplomacy. Anything that's been going on really for the last 48 hours, just frame that in your life right now. Because when Venus goes retrograde, it's going to go through Scorpio. And we get into Venus and Scorpio. That's a really intense position for Venus. People that have Venus and Scorpio are so extreme. Venus and Scorpio itself is so extreme. The whole idea with Scorpio is that if Scorpio people, like if you have your ascendant in Scorpio or sun in Scorpio or moon, Venus, Mars, Mercury to some extent, more like Venus, Mars, moon, specifically Venus, moon, because those are kind of afflicted. They are afflicted, actually. If you're a person that has that in your chart and you can transform that, which is not always easy, because people that have moon and Venus and Scorpio have to go through loss, some loss, either death, or a breakup. If you have Venus and Scorpio, breakup will often feel like death. That's part of it. Scorpio is also a power sign. And unenlightened people with Venus and Scorpio will make power plays. They'll go after power. They'll go after powerful people. They'll try to put themselves in a position of power. And sometimes people with Venus and Scorpio, again, if you have it in your chart, this is not anything personal, but it can, as an energy, it can be very underhanded and can be really driven to acquire things. Venus is related to physical wealth and abundance. A lot of people think about Jupiter and Venus is very connected to abundance. And in Scorpio, people can get very driven to have material wealth. But it's not just material wealth, it's also power, and sometimes power, which allows him to have material wealth. So the Scorpio lesson is to be able to transform that. And it can be very, very painful. Some people don't always get there, though. Some people will stay stuck with the, whatever aspect. Doesn't matter if it's Scorpio or Cancer or Virgo. Some people can stay stuck. But the preponderance of staying stuck is more apt to occur in a fixed sign versus, say, a mutable sign or a cardinal sign. So when we start off with Venus and Scorpio, well, let's find out what the Sabian symbol for that is. Let's get into that. So it's going to be, let's see, I just want to make sure I got my coordinates. Okay, so it's going to be 1050. So we're looking at roughly 11. Let's look at the Sabian symbol for that. Okay, how's everybody doing in there? I'm going to jump back into the chat room as soon as I'm done with this little section. Okay, so let's see. This would be Scorpio 11. Okay, so this is what we're going to be dealing with the Venus retrograde. This is the Dane Rudyard interpretation of 11 Scorpio. Oh, this is interesting. This is very interesting. Scorpio 11, a drowning man is being rescued. Keynote, the deep concern of the social group for the safety of individuals. This symbol should be interpreted as revealing the basic feeling of relationship between the individual and his fellow men. What is pictured is the expression of this relationship rather than the experience of the person who carelessly, perhaps, ventured too far beyond his depth and then was given a second chance to live. So it may not necessarily be a physical drowning, but it could be somebody who might be drowning in their life. It's a metaphor, right? Being rescued. Interesting. A man risks his life to save another. This is love based on a sense of responsibility produced by a vivid sense of interrelatedness. You know, it's really interesting. Like, if you go back probably about 25 years, I think there was this test where people were asked if they would save somebody's life. Like, I think statistically, people were more apt to save a life of a stranger and risk their own life. It was a very interesting statistic, and what it did is it spoke to this peace that we have in ourselves, that on some level the whole is greater than our own self-preservation. And I thought that that was really fascinating. And you hear stories about this from time to time, where a stranger will risk their life for a total stranger, running into a burning building or whatever. But that was about 25 or 30 years ago. When I think of that now, do you know what I think of? I think of a crisis situation and people holding up their cell phone, videotaping it, and nobody's gonna save anybody because they just want to fucking take a video and put it up on YouTube. I mean, somebody in there will probably drop their damn cell phone and go do something, because I don't think you can stamp out the spirit of. I think I'm not even saying that's a human spirit. I think that that's a divine spirit. That's the sacrifice of the self for something greater. I'm not sure if that's human. I think that's divine. Okay, so what do we have here? Sustained by this love, the individual may be more secure in venturing forth, but this assurance can also lead to unwarranted and daring trust. So watch yourself. This is the first stage of the 45th sequence of 5 symbolic phases. It pictures the concern of the social whole for any one of its parts, even if this concern is merely the spontaneous act of rescue performed by a chance bystander. The humanitarianism thus displayed has deep cultural roots. Okay, so this is the symbol of where Venus is going to go retrograde on the 6th of October. A drowning man is being rescued. Very interesting. It's actually very positive, isn't it? I think, especially when we're dealing with Venus and Scorpio. Is there a part of you that is drowning that'll be rescued by a stranger, somebody you don't know, somebody you do know that does care about you? Is there somebody else who's going to be drowning in their life? And would you sacrifice part of your own life in order to help them and to bring them out of the depths of their suffering or their experience? So this is interesting. And Venus is going retrograde. So here's what I think. I think this could be actually a really, really good time to resurrect parts of a relationship that are on life support. Whatever that relationship is, it doesn't have to be like you and another person, like a significant other. It could be you and your child. It could be you and your relationship with your job. It could be you and a friend. Whatever it is, this is an interesting, and it's going back. It's going backwards, going back, and maybe even looking in some ways at where things went wrong or how they went wrong. It's important. It's very important. It sounds like there could be a lot of healing here during this Venus retrograde. Don't be afraid of it. Allow it to work itself out through. Because right now, here we are at 25 Libra. And the 25 Libra, this would be, let's look at 25 Libra. So 25 Libra, we'll do 25 Libra. The sight of an autumn leaf brings to a pilgrim the sudden revelation of the mystery of life and death. The ability to discover in every experience a transcendent or cosmic meaning. Oh, this is profound. This is where we are right now. We're at 25, 26 Libra. 26 Libra, an eagle and the large white dove change into each other. The interaction of the spiritual and the love principle, and of the love principle when critical needs arise. This is interesting. This is an interesting time. I wonder if we are going to see a significant crisis over this Venus retrograde. I wonder if we're going to, it's kind of like when Harvey happened and we saw people in Houston and New Orleans really work together. I mean, that was, whatever you think of Harvey, it was so weird, right? Harvey Weinstein, this happened at the same time as this hurricane. Whatever you think, whether it was, guided, directed, amplified, the response was mind-blowing. And I don't think the response got enough love. I don't think it got enough love. There were people from Louisiana that came over. What do they call it? The Cajun Navy? Isn't that what it was called? Cajun Navy or something like that? Their boats. And it didn't matter what skin color you were. It didn't matter at all. It was just humanity responding to humanity. I wonder if we're going to see some kind of a crisis during this Venus retrograde where people are going to sacrifice themselves in some ways in order to save another. It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting retrograde. And then this Libra 25, the sight of an autumn leaf brings to a pilgrim the sudden revelation of the mystery of life and death. Interesting stuff. All right, let me check in with y'all in the chat room. What's happening? He has a site for predictions, Eric Lay Pink, and he hits a lot. He's predicting a bad earthquake in California. I wouldn't be surprised. California's been getting a lot of rumblers. They had a 4.78 last week. Is that right? Am I right? Trump declared September Preparedness Month. There we go. That's what Jones says. I have a cousin who moved to help them. Yes, probably because it's going to be squaring Mars and Aquarius. Yes. Let's see. What is spooky? As I was thinking earlier about how Robert asked us how we wanted to die. And he is talking about death. Ooh, yes. Yeah. Interesting. Hey, should we do a little should we do a little unconditional love here? Who should we love unconditionally tonight? Who should we love? I have my favorites, but I'll tell you what. I tell you what. If she's still here, let's give Lynette. Let's give Lynette some unconditional love tonight. Let's give it up for Lynette. Let's give it up for Lynette. Let's do a little like unconditional love hugging for Lynette. I'm just going to type right in here. Of you, Lynette. There we go. There it is. So if you feel so inclined, I'm giving her some unconditional love. Tim got it last week. There we go. There we go. Yeah, Dutch sense is pretty. I think something's going to happen. I think we're looking at some kind of crisis with this Venus retrograde, and she's right. JMPJ Love said, "Yeah, Mars square. Yeah, Lynette deserves. Look, let me just tell you right now, Lynette can rock some unconditional love. Let's put it that way. Let's just put it that way. It's got a good story. And I know a little bit about some good story. Okay. If you want to go to my website, robertphoenix.com. I've got 3 charts up there, and we are going to get into these 3 charts. Oh, look at this. This is great. Here we go. Love to you, Lynette. Big love. Look at all these hearts. This is awesome. This is so great. There we go. Double K chimes in. Rainbow hearts. There we go. Look at that. Good job. I'm proud of you. This is a great chat room. Absolutely great chat room. It's funny. I was talking with Heather Eland, and we're going to be doing a new moon thing tomorrow. And her husband, Matt, said, "You have a lot of characters in your chat room." How about that? You have a lot of characters in your chat room. I can attest to that. Okay, so if you want to, go to my website, robertphoenix.com. I got a couple charts we're going to look at here. Check them out. Where's the moon? The moon is in Gemini. We didn't talk about the moon very much. We've got a T-square going on. Sun-moon square right now. It's okay. We're going to work it out. Put a little Stevie Wonder on. It's all mutable. Moon-Neptune square. If you believe it so, will be. Especially on an emotional level. Moon-Neptune square. Okay, let's get into these charts. Good charts. Okay, so the first chart I brought up was Keanu Reeves' chart. And it's a really interesting chart. Like, it's almost bizarre, his chart. In some ways, it reminds me a little bit of David Bowie's chart. And there's something otherworldly about Keanu Reeves. You know, I mean, aside from the fact that he plays otherworldly characters, if you look at his chart, he has 1 square, and he has 1 opposition, and he's got, a series of trines, and he's got a shitload of conjunctions. A lot of conjunctions. So he's a double Virgo. He's a double Virgo, and he's got all those planets just kind of clustered around his ascendant. So he's got Sun 9 degrees, Virgo. He's got an exact conjunction with Mercury. You know what's really interesting about Keanu Reeves? And this speaks to something that's connected to the Sun-Mercury conjunction. If you get the Sun and Mercury too close, you know what you get? You get a learning disability or learning disabilities. And Keanu Reeves was targeted fairly early on as having learned. He might be dyslexic. He's got a learning disability. You can see that with the Sun-Mercury conjunction. Now, he's bright. Don't get me wrong. His Mercury's retrograde. That's interesting. But he's still bright nonetheless. And he's got that cluster, Sun conjunct Uranus, conjunct Pluto. I've been thinking about the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, which was going on in the 60s. Keanu Reeves is he's 54 years old. How about that? How about that for kind of a wake-up call? Keanu Reeves is 54 years old. So in 4 years, Keanu Reeves can collect Social Security. Wrap your head around that. 54, okay? So I was thinking about the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and specifically as it relates to Joe Rogan. If you haven't seen the latest on Off Planet with me and Emily, it's worth checking out because I get into Joe Rogan's chart a lot. And he has that Uranus-Pluto conjunction. I've been thinking about this generation, which is basically born between 1963 and around 1969, 6-year period where Uranus and Pluto were conjunct. And it's a very interesting time. Of course, it's the beginning of all this, MK Ultra chaos and madness and the inception of the summer of love and psychedelia and the explosion of the new age in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of stuff happening during that time. And the people that were born during that time who have this Uranus-Pluto conjunction, I believe, are profound healers and have thought that for quite a long time. And if you look at Joe Rogan, he's kind of a manifestation of that. We talked about this and how he's really into nootropics, to some degree psychedelics. Like he's a big psychedelic guy, and then ketogenics, and again, I said this to Emily when we were talking about this in this interview he did back in 2013, and this guy asked him, "Do you have any advice for like young men?" And he said, "Yeah, get a handle on your biology, figure out how your body works, work out, understand this physical domain. It's called your body." And then get the operating system down. And to me, well, it's not like profound healing stuff theoretically. It does fall into that camp. So I've been thinking about sort of what's been going on with Pluto and what's been going on with Saturn as it relates to this generation. And since 2009, Pluto has been in trine with a lot of the Uranus and Pluto Virgo people. So they've been either forced through their own personal healing crisis to begin to amplify their healing potential for themselves or for other people, or they have been drawn into this healing / physical space vis-a-vis Pluto, and it's become sort of a mild obsession in some way. So it's either going to be crisis oriented, and I've seen this, or it's going to be sort of magnetized deeper and deeper and deeper. Like, I don't think Joe Rogan had a healing crisis, but I think he went deeper and deeper and deeper into the body, and how you can have a rule of mastery over the body in some ways. So now we have Saturn coming into this dialogue with the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and Saturn's at 2 degrees. So if you have Uranus and Pluto in Virgo in your chart, again, you're probably going to be born between, let's say, 1962 and 1969, roughly. Saturn is going to start to hit your natal Uranus and your natal Pluto in a trine. So what's going to happen is that the potential for you to use these energies in a much more direct and functional and integrated way is going to be higher than it's ever been. Higher than it's ever been. Because the last time this would have happened with Saturn would have been 1989. And a lot of these people would have been, probably pre-Saturn return. Like Keanu Reeves has his Saturn at, 2 Pisces. So he hadn't even gone through his Saturn return yet when Saturn was in sextile. Now, during that time, was that 1989? So do we know who he was then? I believe so. I think he was in the movie, was it the River's Edge, if I'm not mistaken? And then Bob and Ted. Excuse me. And then he's in Dangerous Liaisons. He's terrible in that. Yeah, that was like some deal with an agent, right? It's like, yes, you can have John Malkovich, but you've got to have Keanu Reeves because we represent both of them. Because based on acting, he wasn't there yet. Clearly. And maybe that was part of the casting. Maybe it was like, well, he's very naive. Let's put him in that role. But anyway, getting back to the Saturn trine, I think if you're born during this period, that this is going to be a time now over the next couple of years where these energies, these healing energies, the things you've been working on for a while, integrating, maybe building up, it's going to be a lot easier for you. It's like this is going to be the kind of the golden era for a lot of the Uranus Pluto people. And to some extent, maybe for the millennials. The difference with the millennials is that Saturn's going to hit a lot of millennials are going through their Saturn return now. So I think we had first stage millennials going through their Saturn return. Was it Saturn in Libra, if I'm not mistaken? Certainly Saturn in Scorpio, Saturn in Sagittarius, Saturn Libra, Saturn Scorpio, Saturn Sag, Saturn in Capricorn. When we get to Saturn Aquarius, I think we're starting to. I think so. I think it's the last phase of the millennials with Saturn and Aquarius. When we get into Saturn with Pisces, I think we're looking at Gen Z, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so let's get back to Keanu Reeves' chart. This is an archetypal person. Anytime you get Sun, Uranus, Pluto, all conjunct Mercury. It's really interesting. If you look at the role that he played with, Bob and Ted, that was that to me that was a very hermetic role because they're playing these. They're like Hermes. They have this phone booth that takes them back into time, and they're dealing with all these different historical situations or historical people, and they're like Hermes. They're like the messengers of the gods. So this is clearly a very good role for Keanu Reeves because of that Sun Mercury conjunction. It's a hermetic role, and the conjunction with the Sun, like his Sun is at 9 Virgo, and Uranus is at 10, and Pluto's at 13. So the 9-10, it's like almost exact. And when we get into that configuration, we're talking, archetypal presence in a lot of ways. Like there's no mistake that Keanu Reeves is kind of a star. Whether or not he went through, the Hollywood pedo shoot, which is likely. I mean, by the way, you don't really get to any level of real stardom unless you play the game. It's just the way it is. That's the way it is. So I don't think Keanu Reeves would be exempt from that. In fact, if you look back into his background, he's got a very strange background. It feels like he was handled. I've written about him extensively on my website. I'm just looking at the astrological pieces tonight. But he's got a father who's in jail. If you look where he's born in Beirut, Lebanon. I mean, what is Keanu Reeves doing in Beirut, Lebanon? Likely his father was some sort of operative. That's what my take is. His father is he was in a jail in Hawaii for a very long time. So very strange. And he's got this weird uncle. And I mean, there's a lot of high strange around Reeves. But I'm looking at his chart from that archetypal place where he has these figures and these roles that are almost Christ-like. Like Neo is Christ-like. He is the Gnostic Christ. That's what he is. And you get into Johnny Mnemonic. He plays another sort of, Christ-like figure in Johnny Mnemonic. And he plays these roles again and again and again. There's, what is that, where he goes to, is it Constantine? Where he goes to hell and he comes back and he can see all these demons. That's the Sun-Pluto conjunction in his chart. Oh, look who's here. There she is. Yeah. You're a pain in the ass. She's a pain. When she's hungry, she does? She runs across my stomach. I'm watching TV and I get the running. Oh, here, let me be really cute. Run across his stomach. But she's actually a lovely animal. Jasper's right down there, by the way. Jasper, his thing is on the inside. Isn't it beautiful? The two cats have their domains. Jasper, Mr. Inside. Rosie, Miss Outside. But anyway, getting back to Keanu Reeves, Sun-Pluto conjunction. He goes to hell. He goes to hell and he comes back and he can see demons and he can banish them. He's archetypal. This is an archetypal persona. He doesn't really exist. Like, this is a guy that doesn't really exist. Even in his own life, he's an archetype. Right? All right, what about Venus, Moon, Mars? Very, very sensitive, highly sensitive, 11th house, extremely social. He's probably got a pretty good network of friends. Very creative. He was in that band, Dog Star. I'll never forget. I saw his band. They were terrible. But he was on, I think he might have been on Arsenio Hall or one of those talk shows back in the 90s. And he was touring with this, that was when all these movie stars had their bands. Johnny Depp was in a band. And you had the Bacon Brothers, all these guys. I think was Russell Crowe in a band, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, he was talking about Dog Star, his band, and he was talking about the Dogon, and he was talking about Sirius B, and he was very excited. Keanu Reeves was very, very excited. But apparently he's got a pretty good social circle, and that would be accounted for with that Venus, Moon, Mars. What does Mr. Reeves lack in his chart? He's lacking something. What is it? He's lacking fire. He's got no fire. He has very little air. He is an earth water person. And there's a lot of flow between the two. But he has no fire. Now, some of that fire is actually let's see, what's Mars doing? Sextile to Jupiter. Well, that will expand Mars, right? Jupiter will bring a little more atmosphere to Mars. And he's got the conjunction with Venus and trine to Neptune. Mars-Neptune trines are very creative, by the way. But by and large, he has no fire. And I think it's good that he's got that sextile to Jupiter. It's a little more fiery. So what is Keanu Reeves channeling? He's channeling water for the most part. He's channeling water. Absolutely. He's versatile. He's got that true node in Gemini at the top of his chart. And he would do well in foreign countries. I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume that he probably makes a shitload of money on commercials in Japan with a Jupiter in the 9th house. Maybe somebody could look that up. I'm just assuming that. The only square is Saturn-Jupiter. You know, he's got Saturn in Pisces. That's the father. You know, does the Saturn in the 6th house, does open enemies, is the father an open enemy in the chart? Question mark. Maybe. Saturn in Pisces. His father was a dealer. I think his father was running. I don't know. My sense is his father was connected to CIA, alphabets, Lebanon, drugs, maybe hashish, opium, Saturn, Pisces, 6th house. The square is to Jupiter, not a terrible square. You know, it's kind of like Jupiter kind of going beyond the realm of the father, maybe a bit of a challenge there. And then the Saturn-Pluto opposition, the only opposition, that's intense. Let's see what he has. Saturn-Uranus opposition, not Pluto. That's it. He's just got Saturn opposing Uranus. How crazy is that? Doesn't even oppose Pluto. And that's this challenge between being sort of conservative and sort of doing the right thing and being kind of wild and free. I think maybe he's done a pretty good job with that. Anyway, interesting chart, Mr. Keanu Reeves. All right, let's go to the next one. This is interesting. Charlie Sheen. They're born 1 year apart. They're born 366 days apart. So Charlie Sheen, 3rd of September. Keanu Reeves, the 2nd of September. And Charlie Sheen is a Gemini rising, which is interesting because his real name is Carlos Estevez. That's his real name. And not everybody who has Gemini rising has 2 names. But it kind of fits, doesn't it? Especially with the true node there in the 1st house. So Mr. Carlos Estevez, also known as Charlie Sheen, who happens to be 53 years old. So what happens when the cat jumps off your lap and takes your headbuds with you or with her? I was looking at when Charlie Sheen really came onto the scene, when Sheen hit the scene. And that would have been, I believe, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's in that movie. He's unmistakable. So Matthew Broderick's sister, played by Jennifer Grey, is in the police station. And he's there in the police station. And he plays this bad boy. And he really jumps out. Like he's got a serious edge. Really serious edge. And that's when I think Charlie Sheen really makes his cinematic presence known. Now, Ferris Bueller's Day Off debuted on June 11th, 1986. And while the sun would not be on his true node, per se, true node here in his chart is at, mean node is at 8. So if it was June 11th, we're talking 11, and then 8, so around 18, 19 Gemini. He's got Jupiter 28 Gemini. So the sun was in his 1st house when Ferris Bueller's Day Off debuted. And that's when we got to know Charlie Sheen. Really, when he kind of jumped out onto the screen. So I thought, well, this is interesting from a timing perspective. And then not far away from his natal Jupiter. So if we go out about 10 days, which we would have to, right, for the Sun, it would have been 10 days in the box office and 10 days with critics' reviews. And, Ferris Bueller's Day Off was an incredibly successful movie. Like John Waters was at the top of his game, not John Waters, John Hughes was at the top of his game. Very different directors, John Waters and John Hughes. So by the time that film hit, it was like everybody knew who John Hughes was. 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, all that stuff. So Ferris Bueller's took off like a skyrocket. So within 10 days, the first week of box office return was probably pretty good. So at that time, the Sun is conjunct Charlie Sheen's Jupiter. Hello. There you go. And that's when he comes, really, in many ways, comes onto the scene. So there's a little astrology for you right there. And you may want to look at times in your own life that were significant. What's your rising sign? Were there certain days or certain moments or events that took place in your first house that kind of catapulted you into another direction, or highlighted who you were on an individual level? And for him, it would have been significant because the true note is there, right? Or the mean note. Jupiter in the second house, Charlie Sheen will always have a lot of toys. Does Charlie Sheen exist anymore? I've heard rumors that he died. I mean, you don't see him around anymore, do you? Remember, he drove his car. Something happened with his car. There was that whole weird scene. There was this massive meltdown. The massive meltdown scene. It started to happen for him right around, was it 2010, roughly? I think it was around 2010. And that's when he was palling around with Alex Jones. And that's when all the kind of the alcohol, the drugs, and all that stuff kicked in. And I wonder, if he went through the programming, if he went through the same shit that everybody else in Hollywood, probably, likely, wouldn't doubt it. I mean, everybody's got to go through it. It's probably generational. His old man probably went through it. I wonder if his programming started to unwind during that time. It certainly feels like it, doesn't it? I mean, it matches that. I don't think it matched it time-wise. He was older. Like people, like if you look at the beta kittens, they start to break down in their late 20s. They start to break down around 27, 28, just before their Saturn return. You've heard about the 27s. Not all of them, by the way, are that way, but certainly Amy Winehouse was. Anyway, so in 2010, what is he? He's 5 years younger than me. So in 2010, I was 6 years around 45. So he was going through the Saturn opposition, which will unwind you. It will unwind you. It will change your life. And it's at that time that he's hanging out with Alex Jones. And look what he has in the midheaven. He's got Aquarius, and Alex Jones is born on the 11th of February. So that's going to put his Sun, let's see, 18 right up there in Charlie Sheen's 10th house. And Charlie Sheen has Mercury in Leo. So that would put Alex Jones' Sun opposite Charlie Sheen's Mercury. Remember, they went through like total bad boy phase. And that's when Sheen has that car accident. Look it up. His car went off some cliff. And have we really seen Charlie Sheen since then? I remember actually seeing pictures and videos of him and listening to him. And I said to myself, this is not that guy. This is not that guy. I don't know who this guy is, but it's not Charlie Sheen. And for the most part, he's pretty incognito. You don't really hear about him anymore. But getting back to this Jupiter, whoever his Charlie Sheen is, you got that Jupiter in the second house. It's always good for money, resources, things. He went nuts with baseball cards and baseball memorabilia. Jupiter in the second house. Second house, even though here it's in Jupiter's in Gemini, the second house is dominated by Cancer. And Cancer is sentimental, right? Cancer is sentimental. It looks backwards. It looks back at history. And, he was buying up pieces of history. He's buying up, I think he had a Honus Wagner baseball card. He had one of the few, paid a lot of money for it. But he'll be okay, whoever he is. Jupiter in your second house, he'll be okay. If you have Jupiter in your second house, don't worry, you'll always be okay. But again, we have that Sun, Pluto, Uranus conjunction. that Keanu Reeves has, but the difference between the two is Reeves has it on his first house. So you're dealing with this archetypal person. He can play any archetype. You know, he's the Cyber Christ. Plays it twice. Johnny Mnemonic and Neo from the Matrix. He plays the role of savior. So many. That's a theme with Keanu Reeves, the savior theme. It's front and center with Carlos Estevez. It's down in the fifth house, which is good for acting, but he's not somebody that would be considered like archetypal. He's not. But he sure likes to have fun, doesn't he? Sun, Uranus, Pluto conjunction in the fifth. And he's got that Saturn opposition. That's his father up in the 11th house. That's Martin Sheen. Martin Sheen, named after Bishop Fulton Sheen, or he named himself after, because he was always a social justice warrior. Bishop Fulton Sheen was one of the Catholic clerics that was vehemently opposed to the Vietnam War. So he has a Saturn-Sun opposition. So he's always defining himself against his father and against culture and against hierarchies. And is very rebellious to that extent, correct? With the Sun-Uranus conjunction. Let's see. He's got that Sun sextile to Neptune. Oh, there's his sexual appetite. He's got Mars and Scorpio. There we go. Mars and Scorpio. And it's got that sextile to the Sun. That's that danger that you can see that, you know, like sometimes it can be really funny and dorky, but there's an underlying danger at times to Charlie Sheen. And again, you can see that in Ferris Bueller's Day. But there's other movies where he's got kind of a bit of a menace about him in some ways. I think his best role was in Platoon. And you can even see this in the movie Platoon, where he's got, you know, it's like this thing, which is the Vietnam War. And he's born in 1965. So he is born in the cradle of the Vietnam War. Like he was born into that conflict, even though he wasn't there. And we can look at that conflict astrologically, you know, through his chart with that Saturn-Pluto opposition, the Saturn-Uranus opposition. I mean, Saturn at that time, this is when the president, to some extent, Johnson, but we're looking at the president, we're looking at all the president's men, the wise men who came over from Kennedy, that Johnson kept around, Robert McNamara. We're talking about like provosts of colleges, deans of colleges. You know, anything that resembled the father was under fire at this time. It's right there in the chart. It's not just his father, right? But it's also the cultural institutions that were being shaped during this opposition. Just go on any campus, the United States, circa 1965, 1966, and what are you going to see? You're going to see chaos. You know, leading all the way up to, you know, the very intense and chaotic years of 68, 69, starting right here. So he's got it in his chart. When you watch the movie Platoon, he's defining himself against two authority figures inside the film. And that's Elias, who was played by Willem Dafoe. And that's Barnes, who's played by Tom Berenger. And they represent kind of this like Gemini split in some ways, even in his own chart. You know, Barnes represents this, how do I say this? Barnes is primal. You know, Barnes is primal. Barnes demands loyalty. And first and foremost, loyalty to the flag and to the mission. But the loyalty crosses lines, and Barnes is demonic. And then Elias, played by Willem Dafoe, is the opposite. He has his own brand, his own version of loyalty. He doesn't demand it. His guys love him because he's Elias. And so these are the two authority figures that he defines himself against in the movie. It's in the chart. You see, when we get into things like cinema and characters, like that's a perfect role for him. And I think it's probably his best role, as he plays Chris, who becomes transformed by his contact with the war and the people inside the war. Of course, that was an Oliver Stone script. Anyway, very interesting chart. He's got that kind of menace at times with that Mars, Scorpio, sextile the Sun, sextile Pluto. He can definitely pull it off. He has Moon in Sagittarius. Hello, Moon in Sagittarius. Moon in Sagittarius is excessive. Was Charlie Sheen kind of a truth teller for a while? I mean, I wonder if Alex Jones handled him. I bet Alex Jones handled him. I think that's what happened. I don't think Charlie Sheen handled Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones handled Charlie Sheen. But he's got that Moon-Jupiter opposition. That is excessive. Excessive. And the Moon is in the highest part of his chart. And it's in the 8th house, which is kind of, again, kind of obsessive a little bit. This guy likes to party. He's intuitive. He's intuitive, though. I don't think he's around. I think he's gone. I think something happened to Charlie Sheen. What about any other elements in his chart? He's got some fire, Mercury and the Moon. He's got a lot of air. He's got a lot of earth. He's got some water. Pretty balanced chart. Wherever you are, Charlie Sheen, I hope you're doing all right. Okay, let's go to the final chart for tonight. Is Dan White. This is a complex character. Dan White was born on the 2nd of September in 1946. He was a supervisor in San Francisco, and he was the all-American guy. He was a soldier. Speaking of Vietnam, he was a soldier. He must have come back with some sort of PTSD. He went to Catholic school. He was Catholic in San Francisco. He had a bit of a reputation of being a hothead. Well, where would we find that? Well, probably be Mars on his ascendant. Even though Mars is in Libra, this is complex. First and foremost, I think men with Libra rising it's a difficult rising sign for men. And then Mars on the first house cusp is very, it's martial. It's dynamic. It's intense. He was, speaking of saving a life, he got kicked off the police force because he beat somebody up. He beat up a suspect. With Mars on the first house cusp, the ascendant, probably would happen. And then he went over to the fire department and he saved a woman and a child from a burning building. Hello, that's what we're talking about tonight. So he's got this Mars thing on the ascendant. He needed to be Mars oriented. He needed to, like being a supervisor. I don't know whose idea it was to make him a supervisor. Maybe somebody down at the Irish bar he'd go drinking at. I don't know. But that was a bad role for him. That was a bad, and initially, apparently, he had good relationships with the people that he was connected. Like he and Harvey Milk actually got along. Now, Dan White kills Harvey Milk, and he killed George Moscone. And Harvey Milk was known as the mayor of Castro Street. And I think he was like one of the first really openly gay politicians. Didn't Sean Penn win an Oscar for portraying Harvey Milk? I think he did. And what happened was that Dan White had a bit of a break from reality. Like he was only making $9,000 a year. And even back in the, what was it, 1970, 78, 79? I think it was 79. That's not a lot of money. And so he tendered his resignation as a supervisor. And then he changed his mind. Somebody got in his ear and said, no, you shouldn't do that. Maybe his wife, who knows? So he went back to Moscone, who was the mayor, and he said, I'd like my position back. And at that point, there was a lot of politicking going on. And there's some very powerful figures, very powerful people that were on the board of supervisors at that time in San Francisco. One of them was Dianne Feinstein. The other was Willie Brown, longtime mayor of San Francisco, the guy who was told not to fly on 9/11. Look it up. He talked about it. He said, I was given a call the day before. Somebody told me not to get on a plane. It's true. Nobody talks about that, though. They were very powerful people, and Harvey Milk was amassing a pretty significant power base. He still didn't have a lot of money. It's like that wasn't a position to pay very well. Probably drink for free in the Castro if he wanted to. So once these people figured out that Dan White was taking himself out of the game, they started to work with Moscone and said, no, don't let him back in. Don't let him back in. He's too conservative. The city is headed in a different direction. We want to have more of a diverse representation with our demographics. So Moscone said no, and that was not great because Dan White then decided to take matters into his own hands, and he snuck into City Hall in San Francisco, went through a window, and he went into Moscone's office and put a couple of slugs in George Moscone, and then he found Harvey Milk, and he killed him, and he was going to kill Feinstein, and he was going to kill Willie Brown. They were on his list, and he got stopped before that happened. Now, what was really interesting about this, I thought about this, is like, okay, well, he's got Mars there. It's kind of complex because he also has Mars. Neptune's at 7, and Mars is at 15. That's a wide conjunction. And Mars-Neptune conjunctions can be tricky. That's not too bad. It's fairly manageable in some ways. Fairly manageable. But still, it's conjunct. And Mars on the ascendant in Libra is passive-aggressive. It wants to do the right thing. It wants to, be equal and fair and just. But if it doesn't feel like it's happening, like Dan White could take this really personally and decide to take matters into his own hands. And he's got that moon in Scorpio. Here we go. Remember I was talking about moon in Scorpio earlier, 29 degrees. And he probably his Mercury was at 28 Leo. What do you think happened to him? He became obsessed. That Mercury moon square, fixed signs, he became obsessed and he couldn't get this thing out of his mind. And he was going to, balance the ledger sheet with Mars on his ascendant no matter what. Now, George Moscone, not a great guy. He's telling you. He's not a great guy. I know stories. I'm not going to get into them. Okay? I'm told not to gossip, but I can tell you right now, not a great guy. In fact, all those guys that were running around San Francisco, people like Wilkes Bashford, George Moscone, Willie Brown, Richard Blum, who is Dianne Feinstein's husband, Terrence Hallinan, some of the columnists, Herb Cain, Wilkes Bashford, they were notorious, absolutely notorious around San Francisco. And there were a number of brothels there that were running underage girls, young girls. So how did the girls get there? Trafficking. So these politicians, most of them politicians, some of them business owners, were, they were stooping young girls. And probably, even beyond that. It was a boys' club and everybody did it. And so, yeah. Anyway, Moscone was not a great guy. I'm not giving him a pass. Harvey Milk, he was the gay crusader, right? He was, he had a constituency, he had a community, he was standing up for them. So what's interesting, I looked at this, some of the other aspects here. Okay, let me just get into this. There were some few things that I found fascinating about this. Let me go. Let me just do this. Hold on. I was looking at this before the show, and I don't have the numbers here, chapter and verse. So we're gonna do really quickly. So the event took place when Dan White. He was like the all-American dude. He was, kind of, brown, red-headed, square-jawed, Catholic, raised in San Francisco. He was born in Long Beach, Irish American. Went to Reardon, good Catholic school. He was in the Army from June 1965. We were just talking about 1965. And he was a sergeant in the 101st Airborne Division in the Vietnam War. From 69 to 70, dishonorably discharged. This guy saw some shit. Okay, so Mars on the ascendant. He was in the Army. Then he went to a high school in Alaska where he was a security guard. And then he returned to San Francisco and became a police officer. Then he quit after reporting another officer. He reported another officer He reported another officer. This is interesting. I thought he beat somebody up. He reported another officer for beating a handcuffed suspect. Isn't that Mars and Libra too on the ascendant? It's like he turned in another cop. Mars and Libra, balanced, fair, just. Well, White then joined the fire department while on duty, according to the San Francisco Weekly story. White's rescue of a woman and her baby from the 7th floor apartment in the Geneva Towers was covered by the San Francisco Chronicle. The city's newspaper referred to him as an all-American boy. So he was from District 8. So let's get into the assassination here. Okay. After his disagreement with Milk over the proposed rehab center, he had a disagreement with, he said White held a mixed record on gay rights, opposing the anti-gay Briggs Initiative, yet voting against an ordinance prohibiting discrimination against gays. Isn't that Mars and Libra on the ascendant? Well, we're going to vote against this anti-gay initiative, but I'm going to vote against this ordinance prohibiting discrimination against gays in housing. What's up with that? That's confusing. That's Mars and Libra on the ascendant. After his disagreement with Milk over the proposed rehab center, White frequently clashed with Milk. Isn't it interesting? You got White and Milk. You got white milk versus chocolate milk. What kind of white milk? On November 10th, 1978, White resigned his seat as supervisor. The reasons he cited were his dissatisfaction with what he saw as the corrupt inner workings of San Francisco city politics. There's that Mars and Libra. It's like, I can't stand it. It's corrupt. These people are fucking corrupt. As well as the difficulty in making a living without a police officer's or firefighter's salary, jobs he could not retain legally while serving as a supervisor. White had opened a baked potato stand at Pier 39. Oh, God. He should have stayed in the fire department. Would have been fine for him. Somebody decided that they were going to make him one of their political fetishes. Somebody got behind him. It's probably against his will. Maybe. Although he did consent. So he reversed his resignation 4 days later, on the 14th of November, after his supporters lobbied him to seek reappointment from Moscone. Moscone initially agreed to White's request. He must have been moral. He must have been moral with Mars and Libra on the ascendant, because politicians make a shitload of money by taking bribes and graft, and apparently this guy didn't have enough money. This is interesting. Okay. Let's see. But also 2 other San Francisco politicians, California Assembly Speaker and later Mayor Willie Brown and Supervisor Carol Ruth Silver, whom he also blamed for lobbying Moscone to reappoint him. He was after them. He arrived that day. This is on the 27th of November, 78. He arrived that day by climbing through a first-floor window on the side of City Hall, carrying a .38 revolver and 10 rounds of ammunition. Interesting. And he turned himself in at San Francisco's Northern Police Station, where he had been a police officer. I think it's in North Beach. So that was on the 27th of November, 78. Okay, so if we go back into the... Okay, so Harvey Milk. Let's look at Harvey Milk. This is where it got interesting. Okay, so Harvey Milk. So Harvey Milk was born on the 22nd of May. Okay, keep that in mind, because 22nd of May, which puts his sun in Gemini, like 0 Gemini. And Dan White's chart, that's what I was looking at here. Okay. So he's Gemini. So he had a sun. So let's see. Milk was 0 Gemini, and White's moon is at 29 Scorpio. So it's almost an exact moon-sun opposition. And his son, Harvey Milk's son, is in Dan White's 8th house, which is the house of death, right? Death. It's the underworld. So he has the sun-moon opposition. And on the 27th of November, we're talking about 5 degrees into Sagittarius. So that's a sun-sun opposition for Harvey Milk. And George Moscone was born on the 24th of November. So the sun was just 3 degrees. So what we have with Moscone and Harvey Milk is a sun-sun opposition. Very, very close. They're separated by, what, 1 or 2 degrees. So we have this polarization inside of Dan White's chart with these two characters. And Moscone's sun, which was at 24, so we're talking again 2 degrees. Sagittarius is conjunct Dan White's moon. So there was a lot going on the 27th of November, 1978, when transiting sun was on basically just off of Dan White's moon in Scorpio, conjunct George Moscone's sun, opposite Harvey Milk's sun at that time. Very interesting. Very interesting. Dan White got off. I think he did 5 years. It was the Twinkie defense. And he got out of prison. And it's really a tragic life. It's a very tragic life. He got out of prison. His wife left him. And 2 years after he got out of prison, he committed suicide. And that was right around the same time that this whole thing was going down in Guyana with Leo Ryan and Jim Jones. It was a weird time in San Francisco. It's a heavy, 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 heavy time. Super heavy time. So let's see if I can find. Let me find the Jonestown thing. Just so we can kind of wrap this thing up in a bow. So it was the People's Temple. The People's Temple in Guyana. Of course, Jim Jones had connections with the CIA. That was a whole operation that was going on with Jim Jones. Another guy was totally programmed. Incredibly charismatic. This is interesting. This is where it gets trippy, right? Okay. So Leo Ryan goes down to Jonestown because he's getting all these complaints that this place has turned into kind of a rung of hell. And there are relatives of people that are there to complain to him. So he goes down there, and I think Jackie Spear went with him. And she's been I think a senator ever since then. Senator, Congresswoman. So Jones made frequent addresses. This is interesting. Jones made frequent addresses to temple members regarding Jonestown's safety, including statements that the CIA and other intelligence agencies were conspiring with capitalist pigs to destroy the settlement and harm its inhabitants. After work, when purported emergencies arose, the temple sometimes conducted what Jones referred to as white nights. Isn't that bizarre? That is like incredibly bizarre. They have these white nights exercises on at least 2 occasions during white nights. After a revolutionary suicide vote was reached, a simulated mass suicide was rehearsed. So what they went through down there was already part of entrainment. They had already gone through these white night exercises. So Leo Ryan starts going to Jonestown. November 17th, they informed Jones that Ryan would likely leave for Jonestown that afternoon. So it's on the 17th of November. On the 18th of November, the temple members sense danger enough to walk out of Jonestown and all the way to the town of Matthews Ridge in the opposite direction of the Port Kaituma airstrip. That's where Leo Ryan flies into. Okay. So on November 18th, this is where everything goes down. This is where Leo Ryan gets killed, and this is where they do the White Knights. So that's November 18th. November 18th. 9 days later, Dan White kills Harvey Milk and George Moscone. This is totally bizarre to me. This is totally bizarre. White Knights. Now, did Dan White know that these exercises were called White Knights? Probably not. But I find it extremely strange, high strange. We go from White Knights to Dan White, who was in some ways kind of a knight. Right? He was the all-American guy. He was the knight in shining armor. And in some ways, he kind of was. He had Mars and Libra. He basically got fired for turning in a cop from beating somebody up. He was decorated as a Vietnam veteran. He's a sergeant. He was a knight, airborne. Right? Aren't they Rangers? Is that what they call the airborne guys? So 9 days after this is when the whole Moscone and Harvey Milk thing. Think about it. There were a lot of people in San Francisco that Jim Jones had his church in San Francisco. They used to go to punk rock shows there. After he left, they turned that the People's Temple. They turned it into a place to go see punk rock shows. It's called the Temple Beautiful. And we'd go. Who did I see there? I saw some really good bands there. Saw the Dead Kennedys, the Buzzcocks. I think it might have been the same show. Buzzcocks are great. So just within 10 days, 9 days, White Knights, Dan White, kind of strange stuff. Very, very strange material. And then out of that, we see out of the ashes of that event in San Francisco rises Dianne Feinstein. And she becomes the mayor of San Francisco. And that, lays the carpet for her political ascendancy, becoming a senator, and has been pretty much ever since she left being a mayor. Fascinating time. There's Dan White's chart. And then, again, the whole thing that was going on with the oppositions. And the sun on Moscone's son opposing Harvey Milk's son, which opposed Dan White's moon, sun-moon opposition. And that square to the moon that he had with Mercury. Fascinating stuff. Let me check in with you, everybody. So I took you down memory lane a little bit. What was Boo Hiss? No, quite. That is spooky. Hope Robert gives his take on this. Wasn't it a cover for something? Well, I think the cover-up was definitely a Jonestown cover-up, for sure. I mean, Jonestown was an operation, and Jim Jones was programmed. Jim Jones was kind of like, he comes out of that same program that David Koresh came through. Yeah. And then the White thing is just really bizarre. The damn White thing is just so bizarre on a lot of levels. Let's see. I don't think that's okay. Mass murder, suicide would be great when this generation is dead and gone. I don't know. Yeah, I used to have this debate with Theo White. Where was Saturn during that time? 1978. Well, let's find out. Let's see. Let's go into the ephemeris. Let's look at 1978. You always have this debate with Theo White. Theo hated the baby boomers. He hated them. Look, the baby boomers, every generation has its high points and low points. You know, I think if anything, like when I think of the baby boomers, and a lot, you know, and a lot of the baby boomers are my friend, and I'm kind of at the edge of the baby boom. You know, I'm part of this generation. What do they call Generation Jones? But when I think of the baby boomers, I think of the last scene in Easy Rider, where well, it was one of the last scenes where he's sitting around with Peter Fonda, Captain America, is sitting around with Dennis Hopper, and he says, "I think we blew it, man. I think we blew it. I think we really fucked up." And when he says that line, I don't think he's talking about what they did on their little journey in the movie, which to me looks pretty fun, to be honest with you. You know, it's fun to me. I think he's talking about it culturally. I think he was talking about his generation. He says, "I think we blew it," and I think that's kind of interesting and to some extent sort of true, and that really manifests with Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton is the eye of the, you know, he's the jewel of the eye of the baby boomers. You see him there. He's got that picture with JFK. And he becomes the epitome of the baby boomers manifestation as a political force. He was terrible. He totally blew it. Just like for my generation, who's the first Pluto and Virgo person? We'll probably not see another one, by the way. The first Pluto and Virgo person to become president of the United States was Barack Obama. And I think he blew it. I think he totally blew it. I think Clinton blew it. I mean, don't they all blow it? But I'm talking about generational. Like I wouldn't think of like George Bush, George W. Bush. He's a baby boomer, but you wouldn't really think of him in that context. But you would think of Bill Clinton as a baby boomer for sure. He is. So I think to some extent Peter Fonda was kind of right, but I wonder how much it was the fault of the baby boomers. You know, they were first at the table. There was plenty of food on the table. There was a lot of wealth. There was a lot of wealth in America at that time, a lot of generational wealth, and they had access to it. A lot of access to generational wealth. What they did with it, I don't know. Steve Jobs was a baby boomer. We got this computer that I'm sitting here talking to you through, thanks to him. I mean, there are some accomplishments that the baby boomers brought to the table. You look at the type of lifestyle that we have and we champion. We talk about things like organic foods, alternative health, things like yoga. You know, these are all, even astrology to some extent, these are all ideas that were promulgated and popularized during the 1960s by a group of people who were very interested in this stuff and became mainstream, became part of our culture. And it doesn't happen without them. It just doesn't. You know, did they wallow in the excess of their success? Absolutely. That all happens in the 80s. In this conspicuous consumption, and it is really the mass proliferation and distribution of cocaine. I'm not blaming all the baby boomers' ills and problems on cocaine, but it's symptomatic. And I'm wondering if, you know, if we didn't have, you know, massive snowfall in the United States, how things might have been a bit different. A lot of people got corrupted during that time. Like, look at John DeLorean. John DeLorean is a baby boomer. Worked for Chrysler. He's one of their lead designers. Splits off from Chrysler, starts the DeLorean, and it gets torpedoed because he becomes a cokehead. And he's got all this baggage around cocaine. Well, what if DeLorean's not a cokehead? Maybe his car takes off. And now I'm not just talking about Back to the Future taking off. Like, it takes off, and maybe he's got a whole new car company and a whole new line of cars. But it didn't happen because he succumbed to the low-hanging fruit of his time. And I think that's what the baby boomers ultimately have to look at. Like what their relationship to hedonism was like during that period. They have Pluto and Leo. Leo likes to have fun. They like to have a good time, like to party. And, that Pluto piece to be upset, so the whole idea is to transform it, theoretically. Some people don't transform Pluto. They want to getting stuck and hooked into Pluto. But I wouldn't put too much play. I mean, look, for me, like the people I got really pissed off at are really the Pluto and Cancer people. Those people, those are the real sharks. Like Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, those are the people that I was not crazy about. Those Pluto and Cancer people. Some of those people are still around, by the way. They're the ones that laid the tracks. The baby boomers, we all have our crosses to bear generally, all of us. I just think that they probably succumbed to the low-hanging fruit of their time. That's it. That's and Bill Clinton is symbolic of that. Totally symbolic. All right. Let me get in here with the rest of y'all. Let's see. 28 Leo, boom, boom here. It was a flaky generation. Yes and no. I would say yes, it was a flaky generation. No, it wasn't a flaky generation. A lot of shit got done with the boomers. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have a very polarized relationship with them. Polarized because they did some really good things and they did some stuff where it was like, like grow the fuck up, and I just think they fell prey. They fell prey to the 80s. The 80s, man. There's a lot of money going around. There was a lot of cocaine, conspicuous consumption. You got all those Reagan tax breaks. There was it was a big period and phase for them to get really super distracted by. As a Gen Xer and a mother to a Gen Z, I think the boomers took more than their fair share. Fair enough. They were there. They were there. I'm not going to stand up for the boomers, but if you're the first at the table, what happens? You get the most fucking food. I mean, I know that there's some of you grew up in families of 4 and 5. It's usually the oldest kid that gets the most, right? Yeah. So, again, we're not having this discussion without people like, and even I can't stand him. Like Mr. Microsoft, I can't stand him. He's a twerp, but he's a boomer, and he got his company in a really roundabout and sneaky fashion. Okay, Bill Gates basically stole Windows. Okay, that's business. That shit happens. I'm not condoning it, but we're not having this conversation if it's not for Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. This is just the way it is. And you can crap on the baby boomers all you want, but they changed the world. This medium changed the world. And did they do stuff that was shady and shaky? Absolutely. Absolutely. But let's give some credit where credit was due. They were very good at stealing other people's ideas and bullying the shit out of them in order to get products done. The boomer is just a subject to manipulation of the rest of everybody else. Very hollow generation. I don't know. When I think of some of the boomers, like, I think of Marvin Gaye. Like Marvin Gaye was a baby boomer. Marvin Gaye was fucking profound. Joni Mitchell is a baby boomer. She's profound. Dylan he's not that profound. But we got some great fucking music thanks to these people. We had some great movies. Like their best contribution, I think, is entertainment. You have all these really powerful directors coming out of Southern California, like Francis Ford Coppola. We don't get The Godfather, and he's a baby boomer. We don't get The Godfather without. There's some good shit there, and there's some not so good stuff either. To me, it's epitomized by Clinton. He had a chance. He had a chance to live the dream, but and really, he's a Leo, Pluto and Leo. He had a chance to do something. He didn't do it. It's like Obama, Pluto and Virgo. I mean, what a disappointment. Okay. All right, Gates. Yeah, Gates stole Windows. How is everybody? We went off on a pretty polarizing tangent there. But I think, you know, here's what I think. Okay. Here's what I think. Hippie boomers versus corporate boomers. Boomers were experiments in big tabs. Yeah. Well, they were, but we're all fucking experiments in big Tavistock. We all are. We all are. The boomers were there because that's when the technologies really got switched on in a very, very big way. You know, I mean, total experiments. Absolutely. And those experiments haven't ceased or abated since then. Okay. They haven't. You know, we're still under this kind of gauze of trance and mind control at a cultural level. Um, okay, so here's where I want to end this. All right, here's where I want to end it. So there's a guy, he's a boomer. His name is William Irwin Thompson. He's a really interesting thinker. And he was talking, he's got this idea of the cathedrals in Europe. Okay. And the cathedrals are a very interesting study. Like the great cathedrals of Europe would take 2 to sometimes 3 generations to complete. And so you would have one generation start on a cathedral, and it would be their grandkids that would ultimately finish it all off. I mean, that's how long some of these great cathedrals took. And so the cathedral is a metaphor for society. You know, and every generation is adding something to this cathedral of experience. So the baby boomers have done their thing. Maybe they were the ones hanging the gargoyles up, you know, over the, you know, the flying buttresses or whatever, right? But every generation adds something to this cathedral, and you know, and we're still working on it now. So you know, the boomers they're phasing out. They're phasing out, and it's going to be interesting to see how they deal with that, the phasing out piece. This is a generation that will not. You know, I was just thinking, like, well, not just now, but if we move ahead 30 years, 30 years is nothing. It is nothing. Like if we go back to 85, that's 30 years ago. 1988 is 30 years ago. That's nothing. Think about moving 30 years ahead in the future. Well, most of the boomers will be gone. People like myself, you know, in between Gen X and the boomers, shit, I'll be 87. I might not even be here. What about the Gen Xers? Gen Xers are going to be in their 70s. And even like the millennials. Like the millennials right now, the top end millennials are around 35, 36. 30 years from now, they're going to be retiring. 30 years from now, just think about that. 30 years, this is going to be a very different place. You know, we're going to have kids that are being raised in a very odd petri dish world right now, kind of running the planet. And most of us will be on the other side of this experience, you know, unless we, you know, cryogenically suspend ourselves in some kind of AI world, you know. But 30 years is nothing. It's a blink of an eye. And the boomers won't mean shit. You know, they won't. I mean, maybe the history books will say something about them, but it's going to be a very, very different place. Very, 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 very different place. All right, let's get on out of here. 30 years of automation wrecking the workforce. God, isn't that the truth, man? We have some interesting shit that we're going to be facing here very quickly. So you millennials instead of stop trashing the boomers. Can't we just get along? Can't we just all love each other? The boomers start around 1945, 45, 43. I think 44, 44, 45. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna hit it. We're gonna do a little 15 minutes of flame is gonna start on Tuesday. Sorry, I got a big Monday tomorrow. 15 minutes of flame starts on Tuesday. My take, Tani says, my take is every generation flips the finger to the one before it. Because of course that's what happens. Of course. You know, I was a punk rock guy. I hated. You know what I hated? I hated that 1970s like singer-songwriter bullshit. I hated that stuff. I totally hated that stuff. Yeah, no, they had weak. Every generation has weakness, but theirs is kind of excessive because of the amount of, the amount of resources that were available to that generation is prodigious, really prodigious, unlike any other generation, I think, in history. Yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Thank you all for showing up. Always a blessing here to be with you on a Sunday night. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Love you all very much. I'll be back on Tuesday with 15 minutes of flame. That's going to be happening. So I've got a whole new YouTube channel for that. Look it up, 15 minutes of OV flame. Okay. Rosie says good night. Say good night, Rosie. Good night. There we go. All right. Have a great rest of your Labor Day. Cheers.